Welcome to Buried Secrets, a podcast about the paranormal, the occult, and weird and forgotten history. I'm Chris. So I am back talking about the Old Alton Bridge, or Goatman's Bridge, which is located near Denton, Texas. This bridge is supposedly, one of the most haunted places in Texas. It's very famous. And I've been talking all about it. I think this is like the 6th episode I've done about it, and I still have plenty more I want to talk about. But this time I want to talk about some of the phenomena that people have claimed to experience at the bridge. I've talked about some of these a little bit, like last time I talked about different Goatman legends around the world, around the country, and of course around Texas, since the Goatman's Bridge is in Texas. And I did go a little bit into some of the phenomena that are in common between all these Goatman sightings, or if not in common, just some of the weird stuff that people have claimed to see. So, of course, there are many websites online listing all of the different phenomena at the Goatman's Bridge, but I also have spent quite some time scouring the internet, reading comment sections, forums, reviews, etc., and just looking for people's stories. So I am going to talk through that standard list of phenomena that people claim happens around the Goatman's Bridge, kind of like what I talked about in the first episode of this series, but I'm also going to get into some specific stories that I found, and I'll be reading from some really fun comments. So just to start things out, I want to read my favorite comment that I found about the Goatman's Bridge. So this was actually a Google review. You know how you can review places on Google. This is from Heather S. It was posted 5 years ago. And if I recall correctly, she gave it a 2-star rating, I think. So here's what Heather had to say. I was heading to the game store walking from Hickory, visiting a cousin. It was late at night. I'll never go back. I swear I seen some unhuman, like furry man on the edge of that water edge, a good 40 to 45 feet away. Looked like he had horns too, like a goat. I swear I seen the devil. I'll never go back. Never. And the reason why this comment makes me laugh so much is because she gave it either 2 or 3 stars. I was having trouble finding this comment again because Google reviews don't have a very good search function. But, I feel like if I were someone who really didn't want to see the devil, because this is someone who seems to be made anxious by that, I feel like I would give something as few stars as I could give it. Like 1 star or 0 stars. So it's just amazing. I feel like this is like peak Texas politeness almost, where it's like, well, I do think I saw the devil, but I don't want to hurt the bridge's feelings, And, maybe I'm projecting on this person as a Texan who tends to be a little milder than I mean to be when I complain about things. But I thought that was really funny. So this is the sort of thing I've been scouring through. This is the sort of comment I've been enjoying reading. Let's get into these rumored phenomena. And also, I guess before I get into this, I should say, I said this earlier in the series, I'm obviously skeptical of many claims around this bridge. And I obviously take random, mostly anonymous comments on websites about paranormal things. I generally take those with a grain of salt. And, a lot of these I find like a little bit funny one way or another. Or charming, maybe, is like the right word. So, I might be laughing some while talking through some of these stories that people have told online, but I just want to be clear, I am not trying to make fun of anyone or invalidate anyone's experiences, and as skeptical as I am about many claims made about this bridge, I do think that there's something paranormal going on there. I just don't think a place gets this many just weird stories that grow up around it without something paranormal happening or being at work there, right? So, not trying to be disrespectful to anyone, not trying to say that there's nothing paranormal going on there, but, a lot of this stuff has a real urban legend vibe, which I'm always a little leery of. And also, just like, I think paranormal stuff should be fun. And I had a lot of fun looking up these different stories and stuff. So, with all of that table setting out of the way, now let's get into the rumored phenomena. So, I've talked about this in prior episodes, but the most famous supposed phenomena, which you can tell was popular prior to the new bridge being opened around the turn of the century, uh, the most recent turn of the century, like the one 22 years ago. Um, anyway, you can tell that this story was popular prior to the late 90s or so because the bridge ended up being closed to traffic, and so this thing couldn't be done anymore. But there was this story that if you visit the bridge at night, you pull your car onto the bridge, stop your car, honk twice, you'll see the Goatman's glowing red eyes in the darkness. Of course, if you wanted to cross the bridge at all back then, you needed to honk your horn at least once because it was a one-lane bridge, and so you had to honk to let the other cars on, coming from the other direction know that you were going to go. And, the cars had to trade off going from each direction, which is why they closed that bridge and opened a modern bridge next to it. So, you really wouldn't be going out of your way to summon the Goatman in this circumstance, right? You're just honking one more time than was necessary to cross the bridge anyway. And I've read on some websites that this only works if you do it on Halloween. Okay. There's also the story that I mentioned on prior episodes, which is that if you cross the bridge at night without headlights, the Goatman will meet you on the other side of the bridge. And this is tied to the story or legend about Oscar Washburn, who was a black man who was supposedly killed by Klansmen on the bridge. I talk about this urban legend in great depth in, I believe, the third episode of this series called This Way to the Goatman. So if you haven't listened to that, definitely listen to that. But basically, the story was that the Klansmen crossed the bridge without headlights on when they came to murder Oscar Washburn. Another urban legend claims that if you knock on the bridge's trusses 3 times, you'll summon the Goatman. And I read a couple different places that supposedly the Goatman will only appear to descendants of the KKK members who murdered Washburn, though the majority of websites that tell this story do not make that claim. And either at the end of this episode, or probably more likely next episode, I am going to talk more about some of the KKK related rumors about the bridge, and also rumors of supposedly satanic rituals around the bridge, etc. So probably won't have time to go into that today, but just put a pin in that for next time. So what are some other rumors about the bridge? Some people have claimed that they see a shadow of the Goatman holding 2 goat heads in his arms, or the Goatman herding ghost goats across the bridge, or, they've claimed to see this cryptid-type creature, someone who's half goat, half man, with glowing eyes and horns. And I will say, related to cryptids, some of the stories that I'm going to get into and some of the phenomena that I'm going to get into do kind of remind me of some stories about Bigfoot sightings. So, that's something to keep in the back of your head as well, right? So, I have found a number of accounts claiming to see glowing eyes in the woods, around the bridge, which definitely could be eye shine from animals potentially. And I will get more in depth on the wildlife around there in a later episode. But of course, it's like the woods, there's wildlife there naturally. But here are some accounts I found of glowing eyes or glowing lights in the woods. So this comment is from 2011 from Alan G. And I think it was in the comment section of goatmansbridge.blogspot.com. So this person says, I was a 10th grader in October of 1996. Me and some friends were hanging out by the bridge late at night and heard horrible laughter and saw glowing eyes from the woods. We had all cut our teeth hearing the story/legend since our childhood. Trust me, we ran like hell and didn't stop until we reached the Southridge Baptist Church parking lot. But ever since that night, I can't help but get goosebumps and cross myself every time I pass by that bridge. I really like this idea of these like teenagers getting scared and then like going to a church for refuge. Like that kind of ties in with some of the stuff I was talking about last time, like this idea of a connection between Pan and the devil and the Goatman and some of the like religiously fueled fear or like fear that's tied into people's religious beliefs, right? So the idea of like finding refuge in the church really feeds into this idea of like the Goatman being this devil figure, or at least people perceiving him as such. So a couple months ago, earlier this year, in a YouTube comment, and by the way, I have links in the show notes to all the sources for all of these comments. So if you want to see like what videos or blogs or whatever I've taken these from, just check that out in the show notes at buriedticketspodcast.com. So anyway, earlier this year, Yanira on YouTube said, "A lot of my family members have seen this same entity, some with fire eyes or red glowing eyes. I'm not sure what it could be, but it's best not to fear what we cannot understand." I think that's a really nice, it's a nice sentiment, right? Like this idea of not wanting to project onto the unknown and being like, we don't know that it's bad. We just know that it seems like something's there. So on the flip side of that, 12 years ago, there was a Google review by Mahi that begins and ends with all caps. So just imagine that, right? "Don't go. There's a Goatman. Haunted." All caps. "No one will believe me, but he apparently takes its victims and mimics their voices. I was walking alone at 1 a.m. to explore, and I heard voices saying, 'You can run.' And I looked around and didn't see anything except glowing ball eyes, maybe? There's no way something over 6 feet with glowing eyes can be human, so I ran. Be aware, be careful." So there's someone who's very freaked out. And I thought the thing about mimicking people's voices was very, very interesting. I hadn't really seen that a lot in stories of the Goatman's Bridge, so I'll definitely have an eye out for any other claims of this entity that can mimic people's voices, but I find that very creepy and fun. So someone 2 years ago on Google Reviews said, "This place is haunted. Do not bring your family here. There's something dark and evil lurking around here. Don't attempt to provoke whatever dark entity is there. Something tall and malicious is stalking this area. Almost everyone who came here says so when they experience the horror. People got attacked and thrown off their feet by unseen forces at night. You don't believe me? Then go there and investigate it for yourself. You'll regret it. Not going there anymore. I only went to explore and hike with my family, but when we came back, it was getting dark and we were joking around about the ghost stories and urban legends of the bridge and had our fair share of poltergeist when a branch was thrown towards us and no one is around that late. We just ran when that happened, and my sister saw a glowing orb of mist hovering by the tree lines, and it was not a firefly because it was moving so fast, it faded out slowly away towards the water and glowed for a good 8 seconds. And fireflies blink their lights and don't hold it on like that. Plus, there were no fireflies the whole entire time there during mid-fall. That was the only light orb we saw, and it happened after the branch was thrown." So the review goes on kind of with more warnings, etc. I thought this was interesting because it kind of takes this idea of, something glowing out there in the woods, but instead of it being glowing eyes, it's more of like a will-o'-the-wisp type thing, which, is like a ghost light that's supposedly seen near bodies of water in the woods at night, so like near bogs, swamps, marshes, etc. So, this is right by a creek. And the idea is that, the will-o'-the-wisp misleads or like, guides travelers off of the right path and leads them into something that is dangerous or not so good. So, that's a nice little tie into some classic folklore there, right? So then one interesting thing that is said to happen a lot at Goatman's Bridge is that people say weird electrical anomalies happen, right? So car doors lock and unlock. They experience problems with other electrical systems in their cars. They have issues with equipment that they bring out there. A lot of drained camera and recorder batteries, which, that's standard haunted location stuff. It's also standard urban legend stuff, all the stuff around cars. And I found some good stories. So here's one from 2012 that I wanted to read. I graduated from Louisville High School, which is a nearby high school, in the early 80s, and a visit to Goatman's Bridge was virtually part of the curriculum. Had an interesting incident there in 1986 while taking my girlfriend and two other friends from Dallas to the bridge late one night. As we approached the bridge from Copper Canyon just onto Old Alton Road, I slowed down and began telling the legend to the three girls. After 30 yards or so, the headlights on my 1980 Mustang suddenly went out, completely on their own. A little spooked, I jiggled the switch to no avail as the girls laughed at what I thought was part of the act. Thinking I was going to have to backtrack to find some external light to see what I was doing while trying to get the headlights working, I put the car into reverse and crept backward. After about 5 feet, the lights came back on by themselves. I exclaimed, "That's really weird," and confessed that I wasn't responsible for the lighting aspect of the show, then stopped the car there to forge ahead and lunged forward a few feet, and the lights went out again. At this point, the girls were screaming, and I was sufficiently creeped out myself, so I backed up to leave, and again, the headlights came on. Without any semblance of an explanation, and more than a little terrified, I peeled out of there with the shrieking girls as fast as I could get the car going on the, at the time, gravel road. I am sure there is a scientific explanation for the events that night, but I've never found it. I have never had difficulty with the headlights on that car before or after that night. Do I believe that there is some sort of paranormal activity surrounding my car's electrical system? No. I don't think I've ever been more frightened, though. To this day, the events of that evening are a real mystery. So I think it's really interesting that this story tells like a pretty documented, bizarre thing happening clearly around the bridge. And, immediately this person's like, it's definitely nothing paranormal, but I don't have an explanation for it, of course. I certainly don't know what could cause this except for, something paranormal. I don't know. Is there like a magnetic something, some kind of anomaly that could occur there? I don't know how these things work, but I think if there was some sort of anomaly that affected car electrical systems and headlights en masse, there would be way more reports, right? Like it wouldn't just be like the occasional person being like, oh, this is weird. It's like that would have been a public safety issue, and the city would have had to come out and be like, okay, all car headlights burn out or like turn off in this area. We got to figure out what's going on, or like add extra street lights or whatever, like it can't have been a consistent issue. So I found that really interesting. So here's another story that I found posted on a forum from 2007. I've been to Goatman's many times. I live about 2 miles from the bridge. I haven't been there in years, but trust me, there's something or someone there. My friends and I used to go there all the time back in high school. This was when you could still drive over the bridge. There was no new bridge yet. Now, I've never seen the Goatman, but I've witnessed and experienced many other strange happenings. For one, whenever we would start getting close to the bridge while driving, the dashboard lights would start getting dimmer and dimmer, then go out completely, including the headlights. The locks would start locking and unlocking themselves. There was a couple of times, and if I hadn't been there myself, I wouldn't believe it, but the truck we were in seemed to be and was driving itself. My friend who was driving was freaked out and lifted his feet up on the seat, and you could see the gas pedal going up and down. When he let go of the steering wheel, it was jerking itself back and forth really hard. I was there. I saw this happening, and finally it drove us into a ditch and we were stuck. All the while, the inside overhead light was glowing bright red as if there was a red light bulb inside. Then, while we were stuck, the truck wouldn't start, we started hearing this kind of popping sound. I don't know how to explain it. It was really weird. It kept getting louder and closer, but we couldn't tell where it was coming from. Finally, the truck started, and we got the hell out of there. Another time, and don't ask why we kept going back, we were going from another direction through Flower Mound. Going that way, you have to pass an old graveyard to get to Goatman's. All of a sudden, the truck was driving itself again and pulled into the graveyard on its own. It pulled in, and the engine started revving, and the horn started honking. Then it just reversed itself and made us go the direction towards the bridge. It was jerking back and forth, and the red light was glowing again inside the truck. Okay, this is when that Offspring CD. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble getting through this part without laughing. Anyway, this was when the Offspring CD with that "You Gotta Keep 'Em Separated" song was really popular. We had that in, and it was turned all the way down. In the intro, it says something along the lines of "music good enough to calm the savage beast." Well, the radio started turning up, and it was skipping over and over again saying "savage beast, savage beast, savage beast," getting louder and louder. The headlights turned on, and the door started locking and unlocking again. That's when we left. The most recent time I went, it was still daylight. The sun was just starting to set. The new bridge was there, so we had to get out and walk over to the old one. I took a friend with me, and we just wanted to walk across the bridge and back again. Well, we walked across, and then I started hearing a banging underneath the bridge under my feet. There's no man in the world tall enough to reach the top of the bridge from underneath it. So we started walking back across. As we walked, the banging followed us further and further, and louder and louder. It remained right underneath our feet as we walked, then ran back to the car. I haven't been back since. Not because I'm scared, but because I'm a mother now and I haven't had the chance. The story goes on for a bit more, but no new information. She basically was just like, "Oh, I'm planning to go back soon, we'll see." But anyway, isn't that a fun story? Now, it is one of those stories where you're like, okay, it feels a little too perfect, right? Like, it feels horror movie-esque and, yeah, very cinematic. It's not boring the way I usually expect paranormal things to be when I feel like they're authentic. So, of course, who knows? But this is someone who wrote this very long comment or like response on this forum thread quite a long time ago. And, maybe she was embellishing, maybe not. But it's one of those things where it's like, big if true, really, really interesting if all of that happened, right? Like the idea of this entity driving the car and bringing them to the cemetery and the lights turning red and the Offspring CD, which to me, it just makes me laugh because it just feels like such a random thing and, very of a certain time, I guess. But I don't know, there's a lot to chew on in that account. So here's another story that I wanted to read from 2008 from a forum. I lived just down the road from Goatman's Bridge in Highland Village. I attended Marcus and Louisville high schools. I used to party down by Goatman's in high school, and my friend and I also would go hunting in and around the woods surrounding the bridge and the local area. Growing up, I too had heard the legend and all the stories. I never saw anything strange, but did experience some strange things. It was in the mid-1980s while I was in high school. During the day, the place looked just like old back road country. At night, the place was darker than hell, and it didn't help that there was an old cemetery nearby, and the old dirt roads were enclosed by trees covering over you like a long tunnel of darkness. It was kind of scary, and it added to the stories. Nothing ever out of the ordinary, other than hearing strange noises that were either night creatures or just our minds playing their roles and being scared. Except, one night, my buddy, his girlfriend, and I drove out there during the summer break to party. No one was there, just us. It was a warm but not too hot summer night, and as usual, it was pitch black. We had drove around the area looking for other party people, but no luck. We had drove over the bridge several times during our search. Since we couldn't find anyone, my buddy just pulled his girl's Pinto hatchback into the bridge, and we parked there in the middle. We just chilled, talked, and went over the stories about the bridge that night, and we parked there with the radio on low. We all got out of the car, sat on the hood, and continued talking. My buddy told a story that if you peed off the bridge, that it would never hit the creek water below and there'd be no sounds of splashing. He tried it, and sure enough, no noise. The bridge is not that high above the water, so we should have heard something. As we chilled there, some strange noises in the distance started getting louder, like they were getting closer. Then we heard some rustling out in the woods. As I write this, I find myself thinking that anyone reading this probably thinks it's some Blair Witch BS story, but it's not. Then the temperature dropped to not freezing, but cold enough that we had fog coming out of our mouths as we talked. At this point, we were starting to get spooked and scared. We decided to leave. We got in the car, but now it wouldn't start. Could have been the battery, I don't know. After all, we did have the radio on low. We kept trying to start the car, but no luck. The sounds around us started really scaring us. His girlfriend was telling him to quit screwing around, and he said he wasn't. Finally, the car started and we drove off the bridge, but as we drove away, we all noticed that the temperature started rising back to being warm like it had before it dropped. So this is another story that feels like almost too good, right? And I'm not saying I don't believe this person, but it's just very interesting, and it like fits into this pattern that people have reported of just like weird car problems happening, etc. And that's all of this is like very, I feel like it's very like classic haunted location stuff, right? Like the cold spot and, electronic issues, etc., etc. I don't know what to say about the peeing off the bridge thing. I don't think I saw that other places, though maybe I did, and it just didn't leave an impression on me, but I guess that's an urban legend that was spread about this. Also worth noting, it seems to me like a lot of these stories that I'm hearing or finding online seem to start in the 1980s. So I've talked about this a bunch on this podcast, but it feels like so many urban legends and stories and stuff really spread much faster in like the 70s and 80s. And this is kind of, like I said before, kind of following that pattern. Still don't know if it has to do with people's interest in horror movies maybe peaking then, or like satanic panic stuff kind of being a thing in the 80s. So people just like being more titillated by stories of the paranormal and potentially like occult satanic stuff, since those rumors did circulate around the bridge. But worth noting, right? So also people have heard all sorts of weird sounds, growls, hoofbeats, mysterious laughter. And again, this is the woods. There are plenty of animals that could be around. So this is the part that's most debunkable, right? Like it's the woods. So that explains animal sounds. And then laughter, it's a place where people like to party. So anyway, this is a YouTube comment that I found that was it's from like late last year, early this year. This person says, when we were kids, we would kind of party there. We would hear things like splashing in the water, like someone fell in, but no one was around. We would hear hooves on the wooden bridge, and nothing would be there. We could hear chains being dragged, but could never pinpoint where it came from. So the splashing in the water thing, to me, my first thought when I hear that is like, well, could it be a fish jumping or like a frog jumping in the water? Like, if you hang out by creeks, you've certainly heard that before, right? Like I've definitely been startled by like a frog jumping by a creek that I was, sitting beside or whatever. And I thought something was there, and it's like, yeah, something is there. It's a frog. So, if you're up on a bridge and you can't really hear, or you can't really see what's going on below you, and you hear some splashing and no one's around, I guess, maybe it's something paranormal. I think that's more likely like a fish or a frog or something. But the chains thing was really interesting to me because, like, again, like that could be a human source. I don't know. Someone could be doing something with a chain nearby, I guess. But to me, that's something that doesn't have a clear natural explanation. And it's like a little bit weird, I feel like, for someone to be hanging out in a party area with like some chains, especially if this potentially happened multiple times. Like this person didn't make it sound like it happened once. It sounds like it was a regular occurrence. So, that's a little weird, I guess. So I found a forum post from 2006 that I wanted to read a bit from. So this person's talking about, visiting the bridge at 10 or 11 at night. And they say, we just stayed and sat on the bridge for a while. And we did hear the splashing in the water, though we didn't think much of it. Maybe frogs or fish jumping. The one really creepy thing we heard was laughing. And it wasn't normal laughing. It was like evil, menacing laughing coming from multiple directions. We had a dog with us, and even the dog was freaked out. We left shortly after that. So that's interesting to me. Like this person, of course, their mind went the same place my mind does when I hear about splashing, frogs, fish, etc. And like, of course, the laughing could be a human source, but I suppose like an unhinged laughing coming from a bunch of different directions. I don't know, maybe there could be some kind of acoustic echo thing going on. But that is a little bit weird if there's like multiple people laughing in a similar manner, but not near each other, like if they're spread out. Like, I'm having trouble picturing how partiers would make a sound that would be like a maniacal laughing coming from all directions, unless there is some kind of weird echo or something. But, interesting. So then this next person, also on a forum in 2006, described a super weird sound. So this happened, I think, around 9:30 at night. After maybe 40 or so feet down the trail, we all get a pretty weird feeling. Just a real eerie feeling. We stopped for a while but continued on. The trail opens up out of the woods and curves to the left. The entire time we had the creepiest feeling that someone was watching us. We heard this faint noise that sounded like water trickling and continued to walk. We soon realized that the noise was in no way water trickling. It was kind of indescribable. It sounded like wood being slapped together, mixed with a very crackling fire noise, something I've never heard. We kept walking and it got louder. We stopped and it still got louder. That was when we decided it was time to leave. The walk back was nerve-wracking, but nothing happened. So that's interesting. Oh, and I guess it's worth mentioning that the person who wrote this comment was a student at the University of North Texas, which is, right near the bridge. And this person was a radio, TV, and film major. So, like, someone who owns a lot of nice, like, camera and audio equipment, they say. So probably someone who is pretty attuned to, like, noise and what makes different noises, etc., right? If that's what you're studying in school. So here's a story, again, from a forum, this time from 2007. In our conversations, we kept hearing a strange noise way off in the distance. We would hear it about every 5 minutes, and each time we heard it, it was a little bit closer. This occurred several times, and then all of a sudden, this noise sounded like it was right behind us. That was enough to scare the mess out of a few of us, and the others followed and jumped into the cars and took off. Upon looking a little bit later, we came across a Bigfoot scream online, which sounded just like what we heard. No one could believe it. Did we really have a Bigfoot encounter? And is this really another part of the Goatman story? So, like I said, some Bigfoot vibes in some of these stories. So what's some other phenomena that people have encountered at the bridge? So folks have said that they have heard a voice saying to get off the bridge, or they've had sudden violent urges while visiting. There have also been rumors of bad smells, and that is another Bigfoot thing, like bad smells, for sure. I've also seen comments from people saying that they smelled sulfur, that sort of thing. There are also a lot of reports that I can only really describe as bad vibes. And I know that's like the most vague thing you could say. And from an external point of view, as someone hearing an account that's basically summed up as bad vibes, there's not a lot for you to like believe, especially if you don't know the person and their credibility. But I guess for me, paranormal experiences often are difficult to describe and are like highly personal and sometimes do just feel like bad vibes and you can't really explain them very well. So just because there are some vague reports where people are like, I feel like there's a bad energy there, etc. Like, yeah, that is the thing that every bad paranormal TV show psychic says. And, anytime someone is employing that sort of narrative in the service of like making money, like on a TV show or trying to boost their credibility, like that's when I start to get really skeptical. But when it's just like a random person being like, here's the experience that I had, it seems bad there. I had a bad feeling. That's the sort of thing that I do tend to give credence to just because, like, I don't know, sometimes you do just have a really bad feeling in a place that a lot of other people have had really bad feelings in. And maybe it's the power of suggestion, maybe not. But I have seen stories of people saying they felt like they were going to pass out, felt really uncomfortable, felt like they were being watched, that sort of thing. People have claimed to be touched or to have rocks thrown at them. So the rock throwing thing is another Bigfoot thing. So I found a bunch of stories about this online. So it didn't really feel worth reading a bunch of similar stories. But yeah, a lot of people felt like they were pushed or touched, etc. All right, so that's a lot of the kind of like basic phenomena that people claim to see and experience there. Next time, like I mentioned, I want to talk about some of the satanic panic type stuff, stories of satanic cults, etc. at the bridge. I also want to talk about a little bit about some of the claims that people have made about the KKK meeting there as recently as the 80s. I have no idea how true that sort of claim may be, but I did find claims of that online and indications that there are urban legends surrounding the KKK that I have not yet talked about in this whole Old Alton Bridge story. So yeah, I'll talk about cultists of all stripes, I guess. And I'll also talk about some other legends about the bridge, like non-Goatman related legends that I've seen pop up that were interesting. So, like I said, the sources for this episode and for the whole series can be found at buriedsecretspodcast.com. You can email me at buriedsecretspodcast@gmail.com, especially if you live in the area and have had an experience at the bridge. I would love to hear about that. So let me know. You can follow me on Instagram at Buried Secrets Podcast. And thanks so much for listening.